as the assist agents who found the newbie a
Come
little
on.
irritating. Those kinds of routine social moments, basic human interactions, they're not my cup of tea. But I've learned it's not a bad thing to practice being normal some of the time. Still, the assistant yammered on, blissfully unaware just how much he was annoying everyone. I could have told him to stop, but I'm not an idiot. It's like that joke about two hikers who see a bear, and one of them kneels down and starts to do his laces, so his friend turns and says, "What are you doing? You'll never outrun a bear." And the guy replies, "I don't have to. I just have to outrun you." So yeah, I let the assistant chat loudly on as we trekked deeper into the caverns, our path lit by the eerie glow of fluorescent lichen. "What do you think we'll find down here?" he asked. "Like, if we do find an old one, like what type?" "Probably an ooze," I replied as I palmed the inscriptions on the wall.
Join?
The torso-sized symbols had been burned into the stone with what looked like acid. "Like the last one you brought in?" the assistant chirped. "What was it called? The crawling shadow that dwells beneath our fears?"
Much.
I snorted.
I can stop
"It's
time.
Alfie from now on," I said before holding up a finger to stop any further.
I can stop time. That's all I can do. Okay, so you're a time warper. Where you can stop time. Yeah. What about you? I am one of the devil's sons. I can basically do whatever the fuck I want to do. I want some new magic. Well, I'll tell you what I can do before I want that magic. I can lose powers, I can summon demons. That's all, pretty much. But now, since I want more stuff about fucking powers, I can travel to dimensions, I can travel through time, I can manipulate time and space itself. I can manipulate reality as you know it. I can create my own pocket dimension. I can destroy planets. I can create planets if I want. I can basically do anything. Cool. So what's your name? Lucifer. What about you? Jenny? Fair enough. Press play.
I spotted a single point of light up ahead.
27, I got to the university here.
But so clearly visible in the chthonic darkness.
What about you?
When we reached
16.
it, we found that it was a single-head torch, modern design, with its batteries close to dying.
That's illegal, but I won't tell anyone.
We found our missing workers. One of the guards grumbled as he nudged it with his foot.
I appreciate that.
Without speaking, the two men armed their weapons. One slid into point, the others near the rear. On my direction we carried, but picked up the pace to something less leisurely. I read the entry interview for, Alfie, the assistant nervously muttered. It said that it was the progenitor of all cephalopods. Is that true? It makes sense. They're so alien. I rolled my eyes. If I had a penny for every one of these I'm gonna test my daughter that I'm going to a pocket dimension. There, my pocket dimension send. Okay, hold my hand. We're gonna work skip school and go to my pocket dimension. We get you there. Done. Good. Here we go. Well, here we are. The pocket dimension. Nice place. Nice pocket dimension. Oh, I know. Let's show you around. I'm blind before I fucking show you around. There we go, yo. Chill, y'all. No fucking lounge room. Lounge room area, the garage. Then table outside. Swimming pool. Good view. Nice. Oh no. Over here we have the bar area. You got your own bar? Yep. Cool. Oh no. Then table.
Cherry again. We have a spare bedroom. Gang. Then up here, we have some more shit up here. Oh no. Computer area was the security room area. Security cameras room. And over here, we have a disco area, like a party area, yo. Then another bar. Cool. Then over here, we have fucking my room. And my daughter's bed too. Me and my daughter sleep on the same bed. Well, at my house in the magical world, we have separate rooms. But here, no. We will have a sleep together. Fair enough? Oh no. Okay. Are you hungry? Yeah, go fucking cook me up a pizza. Got it, I'll put on. Good girl. Go. Press play.
And things that claimed to sense their anatomy, especially
Just
their
put on,
distributed
Daddy.
central
Good girl.
nervous system,
Oh no.
is completely different.
Her
Something
blonde.
lunged out of the darkness to our left. A hairless man clad in torn and dirty overalls. He growled like an animal as he tackled the assistant to the ground and buried his face into the young man's chest. This peculiar method of attack piqued my curiosity, and I watched with a detached interest as two men writhed on the ground, while my assistant squealed and cried in agony. The fight, if it was a fight, was going poorly for him. He kept trying to lever his bloody fingers beneath the man's face, struggling to pull the featureless head away from his chest. Eventually, his screams became uncomfortable, and I nodded to the oldest guard, who shot the attacker effortlessly. 2 hits to the torso,
Wanna fuck me,
1 to the
Gavin
side of the
Tuckman?
head. The exit
So
wounds
fair.
weren't typical. They were
Can I
bloodless
bust not?
punctures,
Yeah.
like finger holes in
If
plastic
I
wrap.
do what my
The attacker still
other
keeled
item.
over,
Got it.
but his head remained
Thank you,
stuck
Daddy.
to the young
You're
man's
welcome, baby.
chest, almost like it had been glued there. The assistant kept on screaming, a real ear-splitting shriek as he gestured futilely at his chest. Get it off! Get it off! It burns! I walked over and tried to roll the attacker off, but something had bonded the 2 men's skin. Another tug, and nothing. Confused and admittedly intrigued, I planted a foot on the assistant's shoulder, and we pulled with everything I had. Without having to be told, the 2 guards came over and helped.
A
We
blonde.
knew we were close when the assistant's squelching hysterics pitched to a crescendo, and he passed out for a few fleeting seconds before coming to in total shock. He lay there whimpering as we finished the job, finally tearing the 2 men apart, with a noise
got a
like a
feather,
boot
by the
being
way.
pulled out of deep mud.
And nice tits
Finally
too.
apart, I saw
Thank
that the
you.
attacker's face wasn't
You're
a face
welcome.
at all.
Jenny.
It was a fingerprint.
My little
The
Jenny
ridges
Jen.
dotted with little
Oh, no.
pea-sized orifices, oozing a clear fluid that smoked and sizzled in open air. The assistant still lay where we'd left him, whimpering as he gingerly probed his ruined chest with quaking hands. The skin was dissolving before our very eyes, and even his sternum began to wilt and sag like wet cardboard. You could see his heartbeat,
Gang.
like something out of a cartoon. Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, he muttered as he gazed at his own crumbling flesh. I nodded at the guard, and he shot him. I take it this is one of the workers, the guard asked as he nudged the attacker. His light caught an ID badge that answered his own question, so I merely shrugged and gestured for us to carry on. Half a mile later, we found Agatha playing with the rest of the workers. All of them looked like our attacker, with rubbery, hairless heads resembling the giant thumbs without nails. They crawled on hands and knees, using their boneless skulls to pin scuttling albino rats to the floor, where they digested them alive. The rest of the time, they lay propped against Agatha's quivering ectoplasm, stroking the ridges of their... Agatha and I spoke for a good while down there. It much to get her to agree to a relocation to our facility. Whatever bindings held her in place were easily undone, and unlike Bob, there was no need for a crate. She was cooperative. We let her keep the workers she's gotten her feelers on, and with good behavior, she later got her own studio. The other oozes think she's a teacher's pet and moan endlessly about her special treatment. They don't see what I see. I think it's because her creations don't factor into some ridiculous plan of world domination, or the consumption of all life, or some other self-aggrandizing shit like that. She's an artist. Those construction workers, she didn't reshape their bodies because she wanted worshippers. It was just she'd never seen a fingerprint before, and the intricate pattern struck her as beautiful. Everything she did afterwards was simply an exploration of aesthetic and function. I mean, those men are still alive. Vestigial mouths opening and closing behind a thick layer of leathery skin. Their eyes withered and useless, forced to rely on their touch and sound to track their prey. Many of them have given up scrawling desperate messages for us to reverse what Agatha did to them. As the years have gone on, they've accepted their fate, gleefully globbing up whatever medical waste we throw into their cages. A few have even given into the new and peculiar reproductive cycle Agatha dreamed up for them. Imagine that. A whole new self-sustaining species, made for no reason other than a whimsy. That's what I mean when I say Agatha is an artist. I've talked a lot about the oozes. They're a good set of ancient gods to start with, but if I'm honest, they're a little overhyped. Outside of Agatha, none of them really interest me. They're just single-celled organisms with projections into 5th, 6th, and 7th dimensions that allowed them to host the biochemical reactions otherwise impossible in real space. One of them, I'm pretty sure, is a skin cell shed by some passing cosmic monstrosity that visited our solar system a few billion years ago. Agatha confirmed the general direction of this theory, but it's a struggle to get any real details on what that thing might have been. Still, we have other eldritch abominations and ancient gods. Lots. Take Keith, for example. He's a strange one. It wasn't even that long ago that my newish assistant was asking about him. She'd glimpsed his face walking past his door and, understandably, was confused by the sight of an Asian male aged 30 wearing a checkered shirt, slim-fitting jeans, and a polite smile. But why is his containment cell so much stronger than the others? She asked after I explained that she'd just met a god named Keith. Or the Faraday cage built into the walls, I said. And about 100 other technologies. He couldn't physically break out, of course. But it's important he doesn't feed on the workers here, and that takes a little extra pizzazz. He's polite enough. Strange fellow, though. For one thing, I didn't name him. He picked Keith. Most people assumed that was me, but no, he picked it. Feed? She repeated with a frown. What does he feed on? Generally, I find that the problem with assistants is you can't train them, or rather, there isn't any point.
Oh, good.
Even the most highly trained expert lasts less than 5 years under my supervision. The machine ones are fun. Most of them are just massive piles of rusted cogs that vomit oil and blood, or lead into some ancient in-between dimension where everything looks like a shitty hotel. But some of them are really quite fascinating. A few are even legitimately dangerous. Our organic computer unsettles even me. It's Wiley, a genuinely fascinating piece of equipment that some German cobbler in the 13th century Berlin made using the nervous system of his wife, 3 children, and 4 very unlucky prostitutes. What on earth compelled him to do this, we'll never know, but he hanged himself the next day it was finished, and I can't blame him. It's a bloody, ugly thing to look at. A quivering mixture of putrefied jelly and cartilage that whispers all sorts of filth from mummified orifices that, well, let's just say they make for shitty conversation. It's bloody awful to see these puckered holes trying to spit out lucid truths that drive men mad. It's like listening to Elmer Fudd recite the Necronomicon. And to top it all off, the fucking thing only speaks German. So of course I had to hire someone with German language skills, who also had a doctorate in computer science, another doctorate in historical languages, and what I hoped was a strong constitution. Initially, he wasn't very keen on doing the job, but I locked him in there for a few minutes, and after that he was very interested. We already had a rough idea that the computer somehow deduced and formulated secret knowledge, usually catered to appeal to the nearest individual. The CIA worked with us for a while, trying to use it to get state secrets, but they deemed it ethically problematic.
Even though it's a mythical world, there is much more dangerous
Either way,
being
this thing
in the middle of
spoke to
time,
the young upstart
what's
and
frozen
convinced him it
for
was
good.
worth his time.
If that get out, the whole world is
or
gonna be
some
fucked.
rubbish like that.
Even the human world.
Once he agreed, I set him up
God
to
damn
try
right.
and get the computer to cooperate
Time
with a rehab
stopping
program.
and time
It must be
time
able to do
travel is
something
okay.
useful, I thought.
Yeah.
Maybe it
But
could
time
crunch numbers
stop,
for the stock market,
stopping
or
time?
test experimental
No.
medication.
Yeah, nah.
I just figured it'd all work out once the guy got the grips with the computer's inner workings. Unfortunately, and I really do wish I'd seen this coming, we accidentally let him install an Ethernet port in the machine. It had been asking for years,
There is
you see,
creatures
but
in the
no
middle
one was
of
ever
time.
stupid enough to agree to it.
If a human
And of
eye
course,
sees it,
all
it'll
material
go
requisitions
insane.
have to first go by me.
And now
Even if it's
obey
just an
that
extension
creature,
cord.
the humans.
But there are so many of these requests, and I don't have time or the temperament to review them all in detail. So somewhere along the line, this guy got enough resources to give the damn thing internet access. I didn't notice at first. Nobody did. I am juggling literally hundreds of these things on a given day, and I can't keep track of every little side project. I assumed the computer scientist was doing his job, or he'd gotten careless and was now living a new life as an organic CD-ROM drive. Instead, he'd given the monstrous little MacBook a hardwired connection to the World Wide Web, and it immediately got up to all sorts of mischief. Even now, we don't really know everything it did. We're 99% certain it made copies of itself, and we're still hunting those down. And some researchers connected it to a very troubling cryptocurrency scheme. But it was the hospital that sticks with me. A little girl in New Delhi was getting fitted for a cochlear implant when this thing snuck a neurolinguistic virus into the machine's firmware. If you're not familiar, those implants basically make for a direct connection between a hearing aid and the human brain. Miraculous devices, really. A bit of surgery and boom, a person can hear. Of course, having your head cracked open requires lots of bed rest afterwards. 3 weeks, I believe. All contact was lost with the hospital after the 4th day. We only mobilized once I finally realized what the fucking thing was trying to do. The connection is definitely severed. I remember asking the words as we pushed through the glass doors into the hospital lobby. The entrance was open for barely a few seconds, but I could feel the entire battalion of armed soldiers behind us tense nervously as we stepped through. Only once the door was shut and locked down did I get the feeling they'd relaxed. But that left my team and I on the other side. And even though New Delhi was scorching at that time of year, it was cold enough to see our breath. I guess the sudden change in temperature must have taken the others by surprise, because I had to repeat my earlier question. We definitely got that computer off the internet, right? I asked, and one particularly nervous hazmat suit fumbled for their tablet and nodded. The surgical team finished removing the port 16 hours ago, they said. And all other tests have shown that there's no redundancies or backups. Now they're asking what they should do with the computer scientist. What do you mean? He's still alive. They're saying he's in pain. They think they can remove him from the machine, but they're not sure he'll survive. It's apparently integrated itself with most of his nervous system. He was in there for 6 full weeks. I shone my light across the lobby and saw overturned chairs lit only by the flashing amber lights that declared the hospital was in a state of emergency. Otherwise, the hospital was trapped in an oppressive darkness that seemed ready to swallow us all. Despite my experience, My breath caught in my throat. I could feel it. The ambient pain and misery. Something awful had been let loose, and not only were we stuck in that building with it, but we had no choice but to head right towards something that gave even me nightmares. Leave him, I said. It'll be a good reminder to the next guy I hire. When you negotiate with these things, you don't give them what they want without checking why they want it. I could hear the tension in my voice, my fear escaping whether I wanted it or not. The nervous figure nodded and tapped a few keys. I couldn't see. Our boss was prone to doling out literal lifetimes of unspeakable agony. At least the guards were a bit more focused. 8 of them, armed to the teeth and all fairly experienced. They were painting the walls with their flashlights and slowly mapping the different ways in and out of the lobby. They had their own frequency, so I wouldn't be overwhelmed with every bit of chatter. But I could tell from the subtle bopping of their heads that a lot was going back and forth. "What's the plan, guys?" I asked, not wanting to linger in the graveyard atmosphere for 1 second longer. "We have heat signatures in pediatrics." "Survivors?" my assistant asked. "I doubt it," I said to my assistant before gesturing to the guards and telling them to pick a door. One of the men turned his weapon and slid towards the most obvious exit, and we began our journey into one of the worst places I've ever been. I've seen a lot of awful stuff, but it was the quiet that bothered me the most about that place. Most sites I visited are a violent eruption of body horror and contagious nightmares. Communicable cancer that lumps people together like pieces of raw bread, though. Contagious ideas that cause needles to spontaneously erupt out of your flesh. A hole in the ground that has no bottom, but demands the most peculiar sacrifices. I took these sorts of things in my stride, but those silent halls terrified me. Maybe it was because I had an inclination as to what the computer's goals were. We passed room after room, devoid of any living soul, and over time it became clear there had been something of an exodus. Their contents half frozen to the floor. IV bags left dripping where the needle had been torn out and left dangling. Blood-streaked walls and beds with outlines of sweaty, unwell people who were nowhere to be found. At one point, we found what I think was an open-heart surgery patient who had heeded the same terrible call as everyone else, including his surgeons who did not bother to close him up. He must have woken hours after everyone else, late to the party, but that didn't deter him. He rolled off the bed and crawled desperately. He didn't even remove the metal bar holding his ribcage open. He got a few meters before dying. When I flipped him over with my foot, I saw ribs splayed open like an ivory Venus flytrap, his organs covered in a thin veneer of frost. Dead as a doornail, his lips blue and his eyes cloudy from ice. And yet somehow, he looked damned happy to be lying there in his own offal. I grimaced at the sight and tried to put it out of my mind, but the glee in his eyes still haunts me. "How far are we from pediatrics?" I asked the guards. "It's 1 floor up," a guard replied. "Are we still getting a heat signature?" He nodded. The stairwell was full of random bits and pieces. Pencils, phones, shoes, watches, all manner of little things that people left behind as they rushed the door in a terrible crowd. I saw a few teeth, a few splatters of blood. It all led to that one place. Inside the corridor was a mess just like the stairwell.
You guys don't know.
Nearly 1,000 people had converged on one doorway at the end. Along the way, paintings had been torn off walls. Doors were put through so much strain they buckled and broke. There were even bloodied handprints on the ceilings from where the crowd, hitting a bottleneck, had surged upwards as well as sideways into walls and through locked doors. They had flowed through the hospital like a flood. "What could make people do this?" my assistant asked as we started to spot the first few people whose bodies had fallen and been unable to get back up, crushed beneath the feet of the crowd, their corpses made for an ugly sight. Mostly, they looked like they'd been elderly, at least if the silver hair matted into gore was anything to go by. but a few of them were too small to be anything other than children. That computer has spent the last few hundred years trying to speak to God, I said. It's been screaming his name on and off for the last few decades. Sometimes it cooks up little side projects for fun, but mostly it all comes back to that singular goal. I turned to the armed men behind me. Tell the team outside to prep our facilities in teams for the Abraham procedure. There was a bustle of activity as each one reached their radios and tablets and began sending messages. Once it had faded and silence returned, I gestured for us all to carry on. I wouldn't bother, I said when I saw my assistant trying to take steps between the increasingly frequent corpses. It's only going to get worse. And it did. Until at last there was no floor to see. There was only a carpet of discolored gowns and broken humans, all of them victims of some unseen compulsion drawing them towards those doors. Two of them, each with a window painted black with blood and flesh, and just beyond lay our heat signature. Oh, it actually did it, didn't it? I muttered to myself as I suppressed a shiver. Pardon? My assistant asked. Come on, I'm trying my best to seem chirpy. Let's go speak to one of God's representatives. Inside was a girl who paced like a tiger in a zoo. She didn't smile when she saw us. Oh boy,
Put to an action.
Secretly glad no one could see the sweat pouring down my face. A survivor? My assistant asked, and I wondered if he paid any attention to his surroundings. Much like outside, this room had been coated with what seemed like half a foot of blood, meat, and muscle. Unlike outside, this flesh was still twitching. Nope, it isn't like me to intervene on behalf of someone else's stupidity, but then again, I don't like losing leverage either. It's the girl, he said, the one with the implant that you identify. Nope, I repeated. He looked closer, perhaps coming to appreciate the absolutely monstrous expression of hatred painted on her face. That girl would have been the first to go, I said. Her head was used to emit sounds only they can hear. I gestured to the girl-shaped illusion that had now resumed its pacing. A summoning for an angel. Something anyone with half a brain cell would never do. And unfortunately, this summoning worked. And when the angel arrived and realized it had been caught in a trap, it would have smashed whatever was making that noise into pieces. And then it would have summoned every living human it could, to try and find whoever had set the bait. And for every person that couldn't help, it would have gotten angrier and angrier and angrier. Until, my assistant asked, until some arrived to inspect the trap. We could just let it go, he replied. The girl stopped pacing once more and looked at us. It would kill us, if we were lucky, I said. I thought angels were good.
No.
Those things are puppeteers, I said. They can play our nervous system
Not
like a
all
fiddle and
angels
make
are
us
good
see or feel
humans.
anything they want us to.
Like not all
They can
demons
take
are
us
bad
apart and put us back together in any arrangement they feel
There is
like.
both sides.
Because whatever put us...
There is good angels and good demons and bad angels and bad demons. Not all good. Press play.
on this earth, left them behind so they could impregnate unwitting teenagers, split the Red Sea, and conjure whatever other miracles were needed. They were meant to be our caretakers, like we meant to be the caretakers of Earth. That sounds like good guys. Think about how we've treated the planet, I snapped. Think about how we treat the birds and the animals. Think about industrial farming. Think about how we treat dogs. Castration and sterilization. We breed them into disability, force them into incest, clip their ears, break their tails, euthanize them when it's convenient, breed them when it isn't. And they, I pointed to the girl, like us a hell of a lot less than we like dogs. Let me go. I knew we'd been compromised the second we saw the girl as a girl, and not a scuttling arachnid monstrosity larger than most cars. But I still jumped at the sound of that thing's voice. It meant it had a direct wiretap into our minds. Angels don't do wireless. Everything is physical. Somewhere in that room were organic filaments thinner than hair, but tougher than steel, and they'd already breached our suits, and were communicating directly with our brainstems. No, I replied. Letting you out means that my final moments will be painful, but you're weak, that much is clear. And we've been pumping all sorts of nasty stuff into this place for 2 days straight, and I'm pretty sure that's why I'm not trapped in a literal nightmare of eternal suffering and degradation. Let me go. We're open to negotiation, I said with a cheerful tone, stolen from the barista I visited every morning. For a second the illusion flickered in and out. The girl disappeared, and we all glimpsed a bramble-like knot of chitinous legs that concealed some unseen central mass. Only each limb was as thick as my thigh, and covered in undulating hairs and glistening black eyes. I felt an overwhelming desire to kneel. We will let you go, I said, if you allow us to go unharmed. We can shut the trap down. We have its creator, and it has shown us how. But we won't do that if it just means you're going to kill us. The barrage of images it put into my head as a response to this, let's just say it made Keith's last victim look like a Boy Scout. Most of Eldritch abominations don't have feelings the way we understand them, but angels do. They were deliberately sculpted to understand us and our world, so they can better manipulate it from behind the scenes. They're not alien. They're worse. They are jealous and spiteful and capable of putting these emotions to work.
Not all angels are bad. Not all angels are good. Like demons.
Invisible genocides over
not all demons are good. Not all demons are bad. They're both good and bad.
I'm talking violet eyes and naturally blue hair.
Have no bond.
Gone. All gone. We don't even remember them. If it wasn't for Agatha, neither would I. We could kill you, I said. You're not immortal. You're just a thing like us. Biological matter that can be undone just as easily. Not quite as easily. Your official designation by the others. You know the others, I replied. The blobs and the goat-footed breathers who go scuttling in dark places. The dwellers in the deep. The primordial oozes who were here long before you. They call you Exodida, after ticks. That's how they see you. You're a parasite, like the kind a farmer has to protect his sheep from. That makes you livestock. Still, we are at an impasse, I said. You're dying. Even as I spoke, I could feel the facade of my plan start to crumble. There was no easy out in this situation, and I'd entered it terrified as to how I was going to make it work. Angels are a sophisticated species, and they would be deeply unhappy to know that a bunch of primitives had gotten the better of one of their own. I'd hoped to try out some kind of negotiation, but that'd be like one of us negotiating with a stray dog that had bitten a child. No matter what happened, if this angel died, I could count on the others finding me. And that'd be a best-case scenario, living a day or even a week. Unfortunately, I didn't even get that far. Without even appearing to move, the angel unmade the guards. I've thought about this a lot, believe me, but there's no other way I can describe it to you. They were pulled apart into their disparate tissues in the blink of an eye. A bloodless vivisection that struck the room like an explosion. Muscle, bone, eyes, teeth and skin, nerve endings. They were thrown against the walls and subsumed into the living carpet of flesh all around us. I had to suppress a whimper as I realized they were still alive, possibly even aware. Beside me, my assistant fell to his knees and began to weep, but I knew that no amount of begging or praying would change the angel's intentions. We just had to hope it'd be relatively quick, and that the consequences wouldn't be... Your mind tastes awful, it boomed. The words so loud I fell to my knees as my willpower crumbled. Not like the others. How amusing. It has been so long since I bothered to keep a pet. It agreed to your terms? My bosses sat before her like three judges at a tribunal. A man and two women with faces that looked like they'd been carved out of granite. The boardroom was supposed to be a professional environment, where meetings could be had with other relevant departments. But in truth, it just turned into the site of disciplinary meetings like this. Something like that, I replied. Why? One of them asked. He was younger than we thought, just a few 100 years old, and, thankfully for us, something of a history buff. That's why he heeded the signal from the hospital in the first place. Apparently, the creator is something of a taboo topic in their culture. He was hoping to learn a little more about it all. He has been thrilled to enter our organization from within and peruse our archives. And none of his others have come looking for him, the man asked. No need. He is still alive and well and enjoying himself. Business as usual. There was a knock on the door, and I turned to see my assistant poking his head through. He waved and smiled and showed me the tray of coffee he wanted to bring in. I smiled back and gave him a thumbs up. We were always led to believe angels and other Abrahamic abominations were not on the cards for this organization. Will he have trouble working with the program? One of my bosses asked, as the young man placed the tray down and began to distribute drinks. Well, unlike others, they're actually very well versed in human mannerisms and our society. Not much rehabilitation to do, really. And of course, they can appear however they want. So long as they have direct line of sight, I answered.
Hold my hand. Why is that?
A lot of time they let our mind do the...
Because we're gonna fuck down there. And, down there pretty much. Cool. We're gonna teleport instead of walk down there. I don't think there's any way down there besides teleporting. Here we go. Well, here we are. Shit. Yep. Here we are on the edge of my pocket dimension. Over there is connected to other dimensions. Press play.
Heavy work. We fill in the necessary blanks. If they appear as a policeman, we'll see everything we need to in order to support that idea. Gun, badge, so on. Ultimately, it's our own minds that make their disguises so convincing without them even having to move. And what are you calling him, this angel? Uriel. My boss's eyes went wide as they processed the voice that had been inserted directly into their mind. One by one, they lowered their drinks and turned to face my assistant. Even I, who had spent days with the walking nightmare, could not suppress a shiver. Sorry, he said before coughing to clear his throat. Force of habit. I like Uriel. He told me I couldn't pronounce his name. I explained as my assistant stood behind me and placed a single hand on my shoulder. I tried to ignore the taste of copper in my mouth and the intense itch at the back of my neck, so I let him pick an appropriate and respectful alternative. Hi. If you made it all the way to the end of the story, I appreciate it and hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy the story, then drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. I always leave a link to the original authors, so go and support them if you enjoy.
Shit, oh, whatever. Yeah, there we are. Let's watch this now. Gang gang.
I'm not homeless. I have a home. I just don't own it. But it's mine and I work to keep it. Every city has its fair share of abandoned buildings to squat in. But usually you gotta deal with either cops or shitty neighbors. The Annandale high-rise has neither. Police stay away. So do the locals. As a stranger from out of town, I stumbled across the place on my first night in the city and thought it a little strange that a 28-story tower
of course I do.
had been left to rot.
Cool. He's enjoying the smoke.
Black.
Keep these notes. Keep this water.
Smashed.
Thanks. You're welcome.
No booth for a guard. Not even barbed wire on the fence.
Let's
Barely
have
half
one.
a mile
Don't
from
smoke.
a playground
Don't
filled
fuck.
with
Let's
shouting,
have one
drunken
now.
teenagers.
Done.
But none of them strayed in the direction of Annandale. No fires or music or bottles hurtling through the air. It was silent. Inside, I found that the lobby had been torn to shit. Double doors ripped open and left that way for what looked like years. Easy access for the curious. But I was the only one there. Most of the first story had collapsed. Waterlogged ceiling tiles turned to mulch by shitty British weather. I know water is invasive.
After this episode, I will see you in a year.
Colonized the place so bad, algae was growing up the walls. Even the elevator shaft
I'll see you 6 years later.
My own reflection looking back at me as I peered through the brackish
for you guys,
and caught a glimpse of
the
old rusted
for
carriage
us,
just a few feet below. I couldn't help but think about standing on top of it, waist high, and reaching down to pull open the emergency hatch. Only natural to wonder what was down there. A little metal box soaking in pitch black water for years and years. I thought about pressing the button, calling it up and seeing the elevator rise in spite of all logic. An image I still think of from time to time. Meanwhile, the empty shaft loomed above, cables whistling in the wind. I've learned not to linger by it. If you look up, you'll sometimes see something ducking out of the way, pulling its head through the doors before you get a good look. It finds it awfully funny, even tries to make a game out of it, like peekaboo. Play too much though, and it starts to pop up elsewhere. Any open door becomes an invitation. Sent more than a few people running for their lives in the middle of the night. But bad news for them. That thing is more than free to leave this place if it's a part of a game. If you ask about Annandale, most people just shrug or laugh. Kids will talk about it the same way they talk about any haunted house. Difference is, no one dares anyone to go up there. No one uses it to get pissed or high. No one sneaks into the basement to have a risky little fuck. No one hides their stashes there. It has all the hallmarks of your classic urban legend, only people actually stay away. They'll laugh and joke and tell scary stories, but they treat the soil it's on like it houses a radioactive leak. And the council, I'm surprised they haven't knocked it down, but they, out of everyone in the city, have the most to lose by talking about it. They built it in the mid-50s as a government housing. Only a lot of the young mothers who moved in there found their children's health taking a turn for the worse. Started with newborns. Babies that wouldn't wake after a peaceful night's sleep. The kind of deaths that got written off as either negligence or abuse. Screaming teenage girls hauled off to prison on the words of doctors who didn't give a shit. It's always the mother's fault in some people's eyes, and these girls had no one to stand up for them. 2 in the first year, 4 in the next. And they kept on coming for every year until it closed. It wasn't until 1982 that someone traced the source of the deaths to tainted water storage on the roof. Toxic metals leaching into the supply. Not enough to kill an adult, but bad news for anyone with a weak immune system. 38 women had been in prison by then. Another 23 had killed themselves before they could be sentenced. And those are just the ones accounted for. Not all the deaths were from the water. Annandale has a way of being bad for any child's health, no matter the circumstances. More than a few toddlers starved to death as their parents rotted in the tub from an overdose. Even more were lost when they found their parents' stash. Little bodies racked with agonizing fits as their panicked mothers screamed for help. One tripped down the elevator shaft because the doors opened as if the carriage was right there.
Fuck. Down.
And those are the ones who were found.
Oh, no, baby.
Plenty more went missing, written off as runaways.
Because I'm right.
In the end, Annandale's reputation as a cursed place got so bad the only way out was to shut the whole thing down. Board it up, erase it from the records. Pretend it never happened and just forget. But Annandale kept on killing even after the doors were officially shut. If anything, it only got nastier. Talked to one cop who told me he found a guy dead from sepsis on the 6th floor a couple of years after the place was shut down. No one could fucking believe it. They reckoned this guy scratched himself on a nail and caught gangrene like it was the 1800s. Never went to the hospital. just lay there and died slowly and painfully as the infection spread. But not before he took every last bit of furniture in the room and shoved it against the door. Strange enough on its own, but it was the flag he'd made out of his clothes that freaked everyone out. He'd scrawled "help" on it, like he wanted to get someone's attention down below, even though the lock was on his side. He could have left any time he wanted. The cop I spoke to said he was there when they kicked the door down. He still remembers the look in the dead man's eyes. He was glaring at the door 2 days after he'd passed, white-knuckled fists gripping a blanket that smelled sickly sweet from all the infection. There were others, too. Lots of people falling, many of them without a good reason. It got so bad that they bricked up the roof door, but by the time I arrived, someone had cleared it all away with a sledgehammer. I still don't hang out up there. Not after I first went up and saw pale fingers gripping the ledge, like someone was hanging off it and holding on for dear life. I reckon a lot of people see something like that and think a person needs their help. They go rushing over to offer a hand. But when I saw it, something about those grimy nails set alarm bells off in my head. Fingers looked all wrong. So I took my coat off and used a broom handle to move it closer to the edge. Sure enough, those ugly hands snatched at the coat and ripped it out of my hands, sending it hurtling down the parking lot below. I thought about taking a closer look from time to time, but I got a thing about heights and could never bring myself to investigate it much further. You'd think I'd leave, but it's my home. I own it as much as it owns me. People even referred to me as the caretaker now, like they forgot I wasn't always here. Police treat me the same, can you believe that? Any report of a break-in and they call me on my number and go take a look, like I'm some sort of official. Only other guy who was here as long as me was the philosopher. I don't know his name, just call him that because of all the books he left behind. He came here back when the block was still just a place to live, and he stuck around for a few years after its closure. Lots of notebooks in his flat. Thousands of pages talking about child sacrifice made to the gods who don't like being named, along with pictures of strange things frozen in ice and medical photos that look fake. At first, I thought he came to document the curse. He has dozens of books, just recording all the strange things he saw, like birds with too many wings, or milk that turned to clotted blood in the bottle. But after going through everything he owned, I found letters to a wife who died in childbirth. He kept her death certificate way at the back of an old-looking box filled with letters he'd kept writing her long after the date. Another box, just a row over, had the letters she'd written back. Awful things scrawled on random scraps, shit and blood for ink. He dated them himself and sometimes wrote notes about how they came to him. Delivered by a rat that was cannibalized in front of me. Pulled by my dentist from a cavity in my mouth.
Yep, I'm ready.
Written in a web of a spider with...
Let's do this. Doesn't it feel weird? For some reason it seems like the world
keeps changing its design and time zones.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems weird. It's definitely weird for us because we got gods here, fucking cryptics, SCP families here, well 682, his family is here, the Scout King, his whole family is here. They survived.
Yep. Well, oh well. Ready anyway.
Yep. Ready.
Cool. Let's do this. Well, I'll see you 6 years after. I'll see you 6 years later. Bye. Now let me fuck off. Get the fuck out of it now. Get. I said get.